If you're watching this, you've just unlocked a hidden file. In the shadows of America's triumphs lie stories that were never meant to see the light of day. Stories buried beneath layers of secrecy, locked away in vaults, stamped classified. For decades, the public was told that everything was done in the name of freedom, justice, and democracy. But as the years went by, the truth began to seep through the cracks, one declassified file at a time. These files reveal a side of history that challenges everything we were taught. They speak of hidden operations carried out far from the public eye. Experiments that violated human rights, alliances forged with questionable intent, and wars waged not always for liberty, but for power. They tell of citizens monitored, scientists silenced, and voices that dared to question the system, erased before they could echo too loudly. Behind the shining image of the American dream, there existed a machinery of control, one that operated under the justification of national security. Governments changed, leaders came and went, but the pattern remained the same: conceal, manipulate, and deny. Documents that were once buried under top secret clearance now tell tales of covert programs, mind control experiments, surveillance on innocent civilians, and interventions in foreign lands that shaped the course of nations. And yet, these revelations are not merely relics of the past. They serve as a mirror, reflecting the moral price of unchecked power. Every blacked outline on those documents represents a story of someone forgotten. A reminder that truth, no matter how long it's hidden, eventually finds its way to the surface. Today, as we stand in an era where information flows freely, these declassified files challenge us to question what we're told, to look beyond headlines, and to never accept the official story at face value, because history is not only written by the victors. It's also rewritten by the brave few who dare to uncover what was meant to stay hidden. The dark side of U.S. history isn't just a record of what happened. It's a warning of what can happen again. Power without accountability breeds deception, and silence allows it to thrive. The truth may be uncomfortable, even painful, but it is the only path toward understanding, justice, and change. In the end, the real power doesn't lie in those who hide the truth, but in those who seek it, and refuse to look away once it's found. There is something eternal about the truth. It moves quietly through time, invisible yet unstoppable, patient yet relentless. You can bury it under mountains of lies, seal it within vaults of secrecy, drown it in oceans of denial, but it does not die. Truth has no expiration date, no master, no boundary. It waits, sometimes for years, sometimes for centuries, for the moment when the weight of deceit collapses under its own pressure. Then, like a beam of sunlight breaking through a storm, it emerges, blinding, undeniable, and free. Throughout history, mankind has tried to hide the truth for power, protection, or pride. Kingdoms have burned libraries to erase inconvenient knowledge. Governments have stamped documents, classified, to shield their actions from the eyes of the people. Leaders have silenced journalists, thinkers, and whistleblowers who dared to speak. Yet, the pattern remains the same. What begins in darkness always ends in light. The truth does not need permission to exist. It simply is. When people say, "No secret stays hidden forever," it's not a moral statement. It's a law of nature. Just as rivers carve through rock and roots break through concrete, truth finds a way through the hardest walls. Lies may build fortresses around it, But time is the great dismantler of those walls. With every passing day, fragments of what was hidden begin to surface. A letter discovered, a file declassified, a witness who finally speaks, a photograph that refuses to fade. Every generation has witnessed this phenomenon. The awakening that follows concealment. The world has seen empires fall because they thought control could rewrite reality. We've seen propaganda crumble when confronted by undeniable evidence. History is filled with stories of those who tried to silence the truth and failed miserably. It might begin with whispers, small revelations dismissed by those in power. But whispers have a way of growing. They become conversations, movements, revolutions. Once the truth takes root in people's minds, it spreads like wildfire, unstoppable and alive. Consider the whistleblowers of history. Individuals who risked everything to reveal what others dared not. They stood against governments, armies, corporations, even entire ideologies, armed with nothing but facts and conviction. Many were ridiculed, punished, exiled, even killed. But their truths survived. In time, their courage forced the world to see what had been hidden in plain sight. The truth outlives the storyteller. It's important to understand why the truth is so resilient. Lies require constant maintenance. They are fragile constructions, dependent on repetition and control. They need power to survive. Truth, on the other hand, stands on its own. It doesn't need to be defended, only discovered. Even if suppressed, it remains intact beneath the surface, waiting for the moment someone digs deep enough to find it. You can see this in the smallest details of human life. Secrets within families eventually come out. Injustice within systems eventually gets exposed. Even personal truths we deny to ourselves eventually rise to the surface, through emotion, regret, or revelation. It's the same law, whether in the life of a person or the history of a nation. There's an old saying, time reveals all things. That's not just poetry, it's prophecy. The longer something is hidden, the greater its eruption when revealed. You can think of it as a pressure chamber. The longer the lie continues, the more energy the truth gathers behind it. And when it finally breaks free, the impact is seismic. Documents, recordings, testimonies, all become evidence in the court of history, and no power on earth can suppress them forever. The universe itself seems built on this principle. The stars we see in the night sky are truths of ancient light traveling across time, finally reaching us after billions of years. Even when covered by clouds, that light still exists, waiting to be seen. So it is with truth. It travels through darkness, but it never stops moving. And when the truth finally emerges, it changes everything. It rewrites narratives. It restores honor to the innocent and exposes the guilt of the powerful. It brings justice, slowly, painfully, imperfectly, but inevitably. Because people cannot remain blind forever. Once awareness begins, it grows roots that can't be pulled out. The most powerful governments have tried to build walls of secrecy around their actions. They have created agencies, codes, and operations to hide what they fear the public would never forgive. But those walls always crack. A forgotten memo surfaces. A journalist uncovers a lead. A former insider confesses. And suddenly the truth is out, unstoppable, echoing across headlines, classrooms, and generations. We call them declassified files. But what they truly are is the voice of the past demanding to be heard. They speak for the victims, for the suppressed, for those who were told their stories didn't matter. Each unsealed document, each uncovered photo, each testimony is a resurrection. A ghost of history returning to claim its rightful place in the record. And when that happens, the world must look itself in the mirror. Because truth not only reveals what was done, it reveals who we are. It asks us uncomfortable questions. How much did we ignore? How easily were we deceived? How many times did we trade truth for comfort, justice for convenience? The truth is not gentle. It does not come to make us feel safe. It comes to make us see. It exposes hypocrisy, dismantles illusions, and forces accountability. That's why people fear it. But in that fear lies freedom. Because when the truth is known, we can finally act with clarity. We can learn, heal, and move forward without the shadow of deception haunting our path. You see, truth is not the enemy of nations. Lies are. Lies corrode the soul of a country. They turn justice into theater, patriotism into propaganda, and citizens into pawns. When truth emerges, it restores balance. It reclaims the story from those who distorted it. It gives people the chance to rebuild on a foundation that won't crumble again. There's also something deeply human about our connection to truth. We are instinctively drawn to authenticity. Even when we participate in denial, some part of us yearns for the truth to come out. Because deep down, we understand that only truth can set us free. A society built on falsehoods may appear stable for a time, but it is hollow. And sooner or later, that hollowness collapses. Every great awakening in history has begun with the exposure of a lie. Every revolution, every reform, every change, it all starts with truth finding its voice. It is the spark that ignites conscience, the whisper that grows into a roar. Think about it. The abolition of slavery began when people confronted the brutal truth about what was happening behind closed doors. The civil rights movement grew when the truth of oppression was televised for the world to see. Even in the digital age, when misinformation spreads faster than ever, truth still finds its way through. Through leaked data, video evidence, and the courage of those who refuse to stay silent. Technology may change, but the pattern does not. The same spirit that drove ancient philosophers to question authority now drives modern whistleblowers to expose corruption. Truth transcends time, language, and culture. It is the eternal equalizer, the great force that reminds us no one, no matter how powerful, can escape reality forever. There are those who argue that some truths should remain hidden for the sake of stability or security. But history has shown that suppression breeds instability. Secrets create distrust, and distrust weakens societies from within. Transparency, however painful, is always the path toward strength. A nation that can face its mistakes can also correct them. A nation that denies them repeats them. This is why uncovering the truth is not an act of rebellion. It's an act of healing. Every revelation, no matter how dark, brings us one step closer to becoming what we claim to be. Because truth is not about shame, it's about transformation. It demands responsibility, not revenge. It invites growth, not guilt. And so, when we say, "No secret stays hidden forever," we are not merely talking about politics or history. We are talking about the human condition. From personal lies to global conspiracies, the truth is always on its way. Sometimes slowly, sometimes violently, but always surely. Even silence cannot protect those who hide from it. The truth has a strange way of surfacing through unlikely messengers. An overlooked note, a forgotten photo, a chance discovery. Sometimes it's revealed by those who were once complicit, now haunted by conscience. Other times, it's uncovered by strangers who stumble upon evidence no one thought to destroy. It's as if truth itself conspires to be known. And once known, it cannot be unknown. The first reaction to truth is often denial. People reject it because it challenges their comfort. Then comes anger. Anger at the exposure, at the realization that the world is not what they thought it was. But eventually, acceptance arrives, and with acceptance comes awakening. That's when real change begins. Truth changes not only nations, but individuals. It transforms the way we see ourselves. When a person embraces truth, no matter how painful, they begin to live authentically. Lies may protect us temporarily, but they imprison us in fear. Truth, on the other hand, liberates us. It strips away illusion and allows us to rebuild on honesty. We see this in everyday life, in relationships, careers, and communities. Secrets rot from the inside. Honesty, though difficult, strengthens trust. The same principle applies on the scale of civilization. The health of any society depends on its relationship with truth. The freer the truth, the stronger the people. And so, the lesson that echoes through time is simple yet profound. The truth will always outlast deceit. Those who build their legacy on lies may rise fast, but they fall hard. Their empires crumble, their reputations decay, and their stories are rewritten by those who finally tell what really happened. But those who stand with truth, even when it costs them everything, become immortal. Their names endure not because they were perfect, but because they were honest. Truth is not a sword to be wielded in anger. It's a light to be carried with courage. It demands bravery to confront what's hidden, both in the world and within ourselves. Because truth is not only about exposing others, it's about acknowledging our own complicity, our own silence, our own comfort in ignorance. When we understand this, truth stops being a threat and becomes a guide. It leads us forward, cleanses our systems, and gives meaning to the sacrifices of those who dared to speak when others stayed silent. So let us remember, every lie may have its moment, but the truth has eternity. When the last document is unsealed, when the last witness is heard, when the last excuse has been made, the truth will remain. It will stand where power once stood, unyielding, indifferent to politics or pride. It will remind us of who we were, and more importantly, who we can become. You can silence voices, but not reality. You can hide evidence, but not conscience. You can bury the truth, but not destroy it. Because truth is not a fragile thing to be protected, it is a force, timeless, indestructible, divine. And so no matter how deep the burial, how dark the cover-up, or how powerful the liars, truth will rise. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but someday, somewhere, the light will break through. And when it does, it will burn away every shadow that dared to hide it. That is the nature of truth. It survives, it prevails, it liberates. No secret stays hidden forever. And in that single fact lies both justice for the past and hope for the future. Power is one of the most seductive forces in existence. It promises control, influence, security, and the illusion of greatness. Throughout human history, countless leaders have sought it, some for noble reasons, others for personal gain. But power, by itself, is never evil or pure. It becomes what those who wield it choose to make of it. The real danger begins when power is separated from accountability. When it no longer answers to anyone but itself, That's when patriotism transforms into manipulation, and history becomes a warning written in the blood and regret of generations. Accountability is the invisible chain that keeps power tethered to morality. It is the conscience of authority, the voice that whispers, "You are being watched, you are being judged, you are not above the people who gave you this right." Without it, even the noblest ideals begin to rot. Patriotism, that deep love for one's country, the desire to protect it, becomes a mask that hides greed, corruption, and self-interest. The same flag that once symbolized unity becomes a tool to silence dissent. The same words that once inspired courage become weapons used to justify cruelty. We've seen it happen again and again. Nations rise on promises of justice and liberty, only to fall into the same traps of arrogance and secrecy. The line between patriotism and deception is thinner than we think. When leaders begin to believe they are the nation, that questioning them equals betrayal. They replace the people's voice with their own ego. And when citizens are taught that obedience is loyalty, tyranny finds its perfect disguise. Power without accountability rewrites the definition of love for one's country. It tells people that to love your nation, you must never criticize it. That to protect its honor, you must hide its flaws. But true patriotism isn't blind. It's not the act of defending lies. It's the courage to confront them. Real patriotism means caring enough to demand honesty from those who govern. It means protecting your country from corruption, even when that corruption wears the nation's colors. When accountability disappears, truth becomes the first casualty. Facts are rewritten, records are destroyed, and stories are shaped not by reality but by convenience. The government becomes the storyteller of history, and the people, the audience forced to applaud. Propaganda replaces transparency. Secrecy becomes virtue. And anyone who dares to question the narrative is branded a traitor. At that point, patriotism is no longer love. It is control. It demands not respect, but submission. It thrives on fear, on the constant reminder that authority must never be challenged. And slowly, a nation forgets what it means to be free. It forgets that power was meant to serve, not to rule. This is not fiction. It is the repeating cycle of civilizations, from the fallen empires of Rome and Persia to the corrupted monarchies of Europe, from totalitarian regimes to modern democracies struggling under surveillance and censorship. The pattern remains the same. Power grows, accountability fades, and freedom decays in silence. The irony is that those in power often begin with good intentions. They believe they're doing what's best for their country. They justify every overreach as protection, every lie as a necessary evil. We're doing this for the people, they say, for their safety, for their good. And yet, safety without truth is a cage, not a shield. Once accountability is gone, every act of power becomes self-serving. The line between national interest and personal interest disappears. And soon, patriotism becomes theater, speeches, slogans, and symbols carefully crafted to distract from the rot beneath. It's easy to manipulate people in the name of love for their country. Power without accountability knows this well. It wraps itself in the flag, sings the anthem louder than anyone, and demands loyalty not to the ideals of the nation, but to the people in charge. Those who question it are labeled unpatriotic. Those who expose it are silenced or erased. And the crowd, moved by emotion and fear, applauds the very hands that bind them. But truth cannot be hidden forever, and history remembers. The archives of time are filled with stories of regimes that glorified themselves as saviors of the homeland, only to be remembered as warnings to the future. When power loses its conscience, when it answers to no one, it leaves behind scars that generations must bear. The lesson is always the same. Unchecked power corrupts absolutely. Without accountability, patriotism becomes propaganda, and propaganda becomes the new religion. Citizens worship their leaders instead of their principles. They mistake control for order, silence for peace, and conformity for unity. But beneath that illusion, the spirit of freedom suffocates. History doesn't just record events, it teaches consequences. Every nation that forgot accountability eventually faced its reckoning. It may take years, decades, or centuries, but the truth always returns, demanding justice for what was done in its absence. And when it does, it exposes how power dressed itself as patriotism, how it used loyalty as a leash, how it turned love for the nation into fear of the truth. Accountability is not the enemy of patriotism, it is its protector. It ensures that power remains a duty, not a privilege. When those in authority know they will be questioned, judged, and held responsible, they act with restraint. They remember that they serve something greater than themselves. But when accountability disappears, power begins to believe it is the law, it is the truth, and it is the nation. That delusion is the seed of tyranny. True leaders understand that criticism is not betrayal. It's a mirror that keeps power human. They welcome scrutiny because they know transparency strengthens trust. But false leaders fear the mirror. They surround themselves with yes men, silence opposition, and manipulate the narrative until they can no longer tell the difference between truth and their own illusion. The greatest tragedies in history were not caused by the hatred of enemies, but by the arrogance of unchecked power. Wars were started under the banner of protection. Civil liberties were stripped in the name of security. Voices of reason were silenced in the name of unity. And each time, citizens were told it was for their own good. That's how patriotism, without accountability, turns into deception. Not overnight, but gradually, until people no longer remember what freedom used to feel like. When the powerful stop answering to the people, they begin rewriting the meaning of justice. Laws become weapons to protect the elite. Courts become stages for performance, not fairness. Investigations are guided by loyalty, not truth. The media becomes a megaphone for propaganda, not a watchdog for democracy. And the people, trapped between fear and apathy, become silent witnesses to their own loss of freedom. But even in those dark times, there are always voices that refuse to stay quiet. Journalists, whistleblowers, thinkers, and ordinary citizens who still believe in accountability. They are branded as traitors, but history remembers them as heroes, because they remind the world that patriotism is not about obedience, it's about responsibility. It's not about defending power, it's about defending truth. The real test of a nation's strength is not how loyal its citizens are to their leaders, but how willing its leaders are to answer to their citizens. Accountability transforms power into service. It reminds those at the top that their authority is borrowed, not owned, temporary, not eternal. Without that reminder, power becomes intoxicated, and intoxicated power always collapses under its own delusion. Think of every time history warned us. The leaders who claimed to be the voice of the people, but silenced those very people. The governments that claimed to fight for peace, but thrived on war. The institutions that claimed to uphold justice, but practiced hypocrisy behind closed doors. All of them shared the same disease: power without accountability. And every one of them left behind ruins. Yet humanity endures, because truth endures. The downfall of unchecked power is inevitable, not because of revolt alone, but because of the natural law of balance. The oppressed may stay silent for a while, but silence is never permanent. The weight of injustice builds until the collective conscience of a society awakens. And when it does, the deception that masked itself as patriotism is torn apart, piece by truth. That's how history turns into warning. Every fallen empire, every failed regime, every dark chapter in the record of mankind. They are not just tragedies, they are lessons. They remind us that no system, no government, no ideology is immune to corruption if accountability disappears. And they whisper a truth that every generation must remember. Freedom requires constant vigilance. It's easy to wave a flag. It's harder to question what that flag stands for. True patriotism means guarding the integrity of that symbol, ensuring it never becomes a cover for oppression. Because the moment we stop questioning authority, we surrender the very freedom that patriotism was meant to protect. Accountability is the oxygen of democracy. Without it, institutions suffocate, truth fades, and power, unchallenged, begins to consume everything around it. Truth, morality, and eventually itself. History's warnings are not written to be feared, but to be understood. They exist so we can break the cycle, so we don't mistake control for leadership or silence for peace. To those who hold power, accountability is not an insult. It's a mirror that ensures you remain worthy of the position you hold. To the people, demanding accountability is not rebellion. It is patriotism in its purest form. It is the act of loving your country enough to protect it from its own darkness. Power without accountability can build monuments, but never legacies. It can command armies, but never earn respect. It can silence millions, but never win hearts. Because eventually, the illusion of control fades, and all that remains is the truth of what was done in the shadows. So, when future generations study our time, what will they see? Will they see a people who surrendered truth for comfort? Or a people who demanded accountability, even when it was dangerous? Will history remember our patriotism as real, or as deception? The answer depends on how fiercely we defend the principle that no one, no matter how powerful, is above the truth. Power is a test, not of strength but of character. Those who pass it understand that authority is service. Those who fail believe it is ownership. Accountability is the difference between the two. It is what separates the leader from the tyrant, the patriot from the deceiver, the legacy from the warning. In the end, every empire built on unaccountable power falls. Every deception disguised as patriotism is unmasked. And every generation that forgets this truth is forced to relearn it through pain. That is why history speaks. Not to glorify the past, but to warn the present. If we listen closely, its message is clear: question power, demand truth, and never let patriotism blind you to justice. Because when accountability dies, freedom follows. And when freedom dies, history does not remember heroes, only warnings. Power without accountability turns patriotism into deception and history into warning. But power with accountability, that is where greatness begins. That is where nations rise not on fear, but on truth. That is where the flag becomes more than fabric, and patriotism becomes more than a word. It becomes a living promise, a promise that no matter how strong power grows, it will always answer to the people it serves. And that, above all, is the mark of a truly free nation.